Leave your ego at the door and get ready to be raw. This is Strength to Overcome, where real men find their strength in weakness. Hey guys, welcome back to the Strength to Overcome podcast. This is episode 35. I'm Ryan here with my co-host Matt, and we're here also with Mr. Joe Herr, who was with us a couple weeks ago as a guest, and he is back with us today in a new role that we're pretty excited to have him here with us. Joe is our newest team member on the Strength to Overcome podcast, and he's creating a little 3-man game that we got going on now. So Joe, welcome to the show once again, but also welcome to the team.
Thank you, guys. Honored to be here. Grateful to be a part of this group. I'm excited, super excited. A little nervous. You guys got 34 episodes on me, or 33. So hopefully I can add some value to the group.
Joe, great to have you here, mate. And we were just talking off the air about what it means for you to be with us as a co-host. And so we've had a lot of conversations over the last couple of weeks since your episode, and was a powerful testimony to those out there struggling with any kind of, overconsumption, but particularly on the alcohol scene. And so we don't take a decision like this lightly. You know, the audience has been with Ryan and I for 34 weeks now, and you were obviously part of that 34-week process. But moving forward, we've always talked about having growth within this Strength to Overcome movement, and we want to develop a community that's local. We want to develop a community that's not necessarily only local, but we want to take it viral and try and get people out there that can't always be next to us or in this area, and realize that, hey, I'm not alone, right? And there is support out there. And so that's the movement we've got. And we see value in some of your stories that are going to come to the surface here as we talk more. But we know that you've got a lot you've been through, things that you're still going through. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well. But I think that what's most important is that hearing about why you wanted to be a part of this, because I know a lot of people out there have been on the show and they've added a lot of value, but they've not all said, hey, I want to be a part of that specifically. So if you want to maybe open up with a little bit about how that came to you, and maybe some of the hesitations and the hitch in your spirit that you had that maybe you had to overcome to even say, hey, you know what, let me try this and see how I go.
Yeah, this, after doing the podcast, I did a lot of thinking about what this could do for me personally, selfishly. And to rewind a little bit, I had some really good success in the personal training industry. And, I was able to have a lot of success. And I realized that accountability was a big part of that, accountability to others. And I didn't even realize it was my clients that I was accountable to that was the most impactful, because when I stopped training, I noticed that in a big way. And after doing this podcast, I realized, wow, first off, I was super nervous, super out of my comfort zone, didn't say what I wanted to say, didn't explain kind of how I wanted to, just a lot of things, right? And it made me realize, wow, this is an area I really can improve on. And in the meantime, maybe I could help some people along the way. And so after talking with you guys, and it seemed like a good fit, and I like where your vision is. I like where the vision of this podcast is going, to help people that, not just, people that have already done it, to get better, but people that maybe have never had success, in their lives, and they're struggling, and, they need help, they need guidance, they need, other men that understand where they've been. I feel I can add value just because of a lot of the failures and successes that I've had so far. So that's a lot of the reason that I wanted to be a part of this. And I'm super grateful that you guys said, hey, come on board, because you definitely didn't have to do that. You guys had built something pretty solid so far. So hopefully I can bring, like I said before, a lot of value to this group.
Yeah, man, absolutely. It's a testament to kind of what we're building here. And I know Matt and I have been kind of scratching our heads for 34 weeks. Like, how do we grow this thing? How do we get more listeners, get more viewers? And, this popped up, this opportunity with you, and it's a real testament to the amount of growth we're able to do now by bringing someone like you on, and having a third co-host with us to truly grow the movement. So I'm really excited to have you with us.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that as well, and just remind the audience that it takes a lot of courage to be on here. I think that Ryan and I have started from scratch with some of our testimony episodes, which are a little bit raw, and it wasn't easy to put that out there. And I know we've both had some individual feedback from people that have met us personally, or people that have maybe even just heard it and reached out through the channels that we have. And it's been quite a remarkable process to go through, putting your story out there and trying to figure out, well, how much do I share, right? How much do I put out there? And I personally have found that the more I share and the more vulnerable I become, I have found myself becoming the more authentic Matt that I know I can be, and I have been in my past, where I've made a lot of failures, I've made a lot of mistakes, and you keep that hidden, you keep that behind closed doors, but in all reality, then you're creating two versions of yourself, or maybe it's 3 or 4 versions of yourself. Hey, I'm this way as a trainer, I'm this way as a husband, I'm this way as a dad, I'm this way as a brother, I'm this way as a son, I'm this way as a neighbor. And I think that to truly get the most out of your life, you really want to be the most authentic version of yourself. And then you start to say, right, now I'm becoming a very authentic version of myself, and I don't like it. And so now you get to work on the true areas that now you start to see, because for me, this podcast has been a mirror. And I talked about a mirror scenario or story that happened in my past that alluded to the fact that when I do this podcast, I really have to take a hard look in the mirror at myself. And so I think each of us have got a lot that we can offer, and we're going to do that moving forward. Before we get into Joe's accountability side, Ryan, I'd like you to follow up a little bit. I know that 2 weeks ago, we talked a little bit about your experts, I'll use the word, that you were going to be talking to and getting some information on regarding some Asperger's and trying to understand a little bit of that. Can we get a little bit of an update on that without taking over the whole time we've got here? But I think that that's important to have the continuity as we grow this, to make sure we check in on our co-host to see where they're at with some pretty big movements here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just to kind of catch people up, it's been a little bit of a journey. We've been talking about Asperger's or, autism spectrum disorder. And, it was something that a counselor brought up to me, a couple months ago and said, hey, it seems to me like you've got some spectrum stuff going on. And so just to kind of fill the audience in on that, and also fill Joe in on that, it's something I've been kind of going down a rabbit hole with some different therapists, and most recently a psychologist who's they've done a series of interviews with me and to determine if there is a diagnosis involved with autism spectrum stuff. And so most recently last week we talked about that, and I had another appointment left, and I was able to have that appointment just the other day, and it turns out, when it's all said and done, that the psychologist went ahead and diagnosed me as basically autism spectrum disorder level 1, which, means, functioning with no support. So like a higher functioning version of autism. And, it was quite I guess the words I'll use are relief and a little bit of validation were the two feelings kind of that I felt right off the bat when they did that. Because, for folks like Joe that don't know my whole story, I've kind of spent my whole life, as an adult, even as a kid, very frustrated, very angry, very confused, and not really knowing what's going on inside my brain. And, it turns out that this autism thing is real. And I met all the diagnostic criteria to be diagnosed, and there were like 7 different sections of the interviews that he took me through during the course of 2 different sessions, and you had to have 3 out of 3 of the first 3. You had to nail them all, between social and nonverbal and relationships. I met all the criteria, and then in the final 4, you only had to have 2 out of the 4 as shown as clearly evident that you were autistic. And I had about 2.5 out of the 4. The only ones that were really not evident were the repetitive movements. Like, I don't sit here and like rock back and forth, that sort of deal. I don't have a ton of sensory stuff going on, but in terms of like interests was one of the categories. Matt, you'll kind of be able to talk to this, like the very intense interests in fitness and golf and now bourbon and as a kid it was, figurines or Beanie Babies or Pokemon cards or whatever it is. That aligns really well with kind of a spectrum disorder type of a thing. And so, he went through all the categories with me, and it was interesting to see it's not just kind of a judgment call. It's like you have to literally meet these diagnostic criteria to be considered autistic. And sure enough, I met him. And I'll say it's a little bit surprising, but honestly, the two big emotions were relief and kind of a sense of validation of like, wow, this is really what's been going on. So that's kind of where things stand in my world, and we're just kind of processing that here at home and just kind of figuring out what next steps are for me.
That's powerful to share. When I first started this with you, we were talking off the air thinking, okay, we've both been through a lot. We're both battling a lot. We were both in such a poor place at the time. The first episode was called Broken But Hopeful. And that's because of the state we were in. And we decided we wanted to start this podcast before we got through some of these things, because we're tired of, not to point the finger at anybody that's done this, but we wanted to provide an option for people that were in the middle of it, or at least document this process out of the hole. And that required a level of vulnerability that is really uncomfortable. And, you just shared something that's just mind blowing to anybody that knows you. I met you as a golf pro and you were very good at it. And then, years later, I found out you gave that up and became a gym owner and, dialed into that. And then throughout this story, we've learnt about the bourbon side of things. And so it makes a lot of sense to me because I've watched you walk away from one career to go to the next, to then fall into the next thing, right? And so I just want to applaud you for being able to be so open and put this brand new chunk of information out to the audience. And 35 episodes in now, you're doing it willingly, and I'm proud of you, man. I just want to give you a high five through the screen here to congratulate your ability to just go openly and say, hey, this is where I'm at. I don't have the answers yet, but we're working through it. So, part of what we're doing here with Joe on the show now is to be able to give each other some support through that. And I think that was such a powerful little moment there. I need to reach out and give you a hug kind of thing, right? So well done on that, man. I know, Joe, a lot of this is new to you, but that's what he's going through. And we could probably be here for 4 or 5 hours unpacking what that means. But I think that you're still processing it yourself, Ryan. Is that pretty much where you're at, trying to just grasp what does this mean now?
Yeah. It's kind of like, wow, this took 39 years to figure out, why did it take that long? And, how did I get to this point? And, now what's the next steps? I think my wife and I have a lot of work to do to kind of figure out, what does it mean to be living with someone, married to someone who's autistic in that sense. It can open a lot of doors for us in our relationship to be able to grow and make things stronger. And for me, I think I can start to dial in and get a kind of a grasp on the depression and make some bigger steps toward fulfillment and kind of what my purpose is. And I think this is just a little stepping stone in the right direction. So it's, like I said, the feeling of relief is kind of the main feeling right now. So we'll kind of go with that for now and keep on trucking.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. Brilliant. It's funny as we have 3 of us on here now, I've got to be careful about when I speak because, of course, anybody could jump in. And so I have to look at the cameras here to see who's going to jump in and chime in. 'Cause previously, when you're done, I'll just jump in. But Joe, I know you've kind of gone to say a few things there a few times, so I'll let you jump in now.
No, yeah. Well, I was pausing as well because I have a tendency in a lot of conversations, according to my wife and probably a lot of other people, to talk a lot, get in there, say what I got to say. So I'm trying to try something different because I know on a podcast, you really got to pause and let someone get through their whole thought. I tend to jump in there. No, I mean, I would just say that's a pretty intense diagnosis as far as just, yeah, knowing it 39 years later. But I think, like you said, I think it's having that relief is a big one. And this is a new chapter for you, and it opens up a new door. I mean, it opens up a door that I think can only help you now. Knowing this, I'm sure there's tools, I'm sure there's tons of information that'll allow you to have success, more success in those areas you were frustrated prior. So I think
Yeah.
that's to me, it's sounds exciting because you've had it this whole time, but now you know. So, knowledge is a powerful thing because now, with the internet, you're able to really help yourself out there. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Joe, I know that you and I have talked a lot at the gym. For the audience that don't know, Joe and I happen to live in the same area, and we were, working together at Crunch there for a little while. And obviously, I'm back there, you're not. But we've had some time there where I've had a cancelled session. You've happened to walk in, and that's happened a couple of times. That's felt divine, right? To be able to put those things together. Can you talk a little bit about what you mentioned earlier, where you felt like selfishly you wanted to be on here? What is it that you feel like this exposed in you that made you say, you know what, this is something I'd like to do?
Yeah, I think so. For me, having success in the gym industry, I thought I knew what was keeping that success going until I stopped it and I was on my own, kind of my own boss. And I realized over time that I just I didn't have the accountability that I needed. Like I didn't necessarily want a boss, but I needed accountability. And this group, I saw an opportunity to get accountability for the areas in my life that I want to get better at, the areas that I've had success and then failure. One being in my finances, I had massive success. And then over these last 3 years, I made some poor decisions, made some good decisions, and it led me to a place I'm at now where I'm in a new profession, I'm in a new job, we'll call it, but I need more accountability. I seem to be doing some of the work, but not as much as I was when I was in the gym industry. Because I think all my clients, all my peers, all that accountability was really helping me. I didn't realize how much. So when this came up, I thought, well, here's an opportunity, you know, uh, to be accountable, right? To be accountable and then to hopefully help other people, in their struggles, right? And their challenges. So that's that's kind of what selfishly led me to wanting to be a part of this. Even if I didn't co-host, just being a part of the group, I think would have been powerful, right? But to co-host is another level because now I'm accountable to you guys and I'm accountable to your viewers. And I want to do a good job. I want to, so that's what brought me here. I look forward to improving every podcast, to bringing my vulnerabilities, my strengths, my weaknesses, all of that to the table so we can share them and grow together as men.
What would you say your area of accountability needs attention?
Well, yeah, I thought about that over the week. And I think right now, because to be honest, there's like many areas, but I think the most important one right now would be, and I wrote it down so that I wouldn't forget, but kind of like, so my new area of making money is in trading, right? And so I've been taking it seriously, but not like I did when I was really having success in my other career. And so for me, finances is going to be the area that I want to focus on the most. And more importantly, my job as a professional trader. I need more consistency. I need to basically just act like I was when I was at Crunch. Every morning, journaling, meditating, goals are on the board, visualizing. Mindset was solid, but it was consistent. And that is the area that I need the most help in so that I can keep going. Because what I've noticed in this line of work is you're in your head a lot, like way more than training. Because with training, I'm able to feed off other people and then I get out of my head because I help someone, right? When you're helping someone, you're not in your head. It's beautiful. But when you're trading, you're in your head 24/7. on a screen. That's it.
As a trainer of the past, both of us, Ryan, have been there, and I just want to make sure, Joe, I know you didn't intentionally say it, but you said your audience or your viewers, your listeners, right? They're now ours, right? So
Mm.
first and foremost, I want to reiterate that you are part of Strength to Overcome now, and what it becomes is ours. It's not Ryan's, it's not mine. It's a community of guys really looking to grow from each other, and we appreciate you sharing that vulnerability side of it. Where do you specifically receive the best type of accountability? Is it a hug? Is it an encouragement? Is it a slap upside the head? Is it a text? Is it a check-in? What have you found that has allowed you in the past, certain areas, be able to get back on track?
I think, this obviously is one of them is being accountable to you guys and actually bringing what I've done, what I haven't done. But like check-ins are really good, I think, for me. Check-ins, how often? Well, I don't know yet, right? Because this is something that, I have ebbs and flows, right? So the consistency part is the key for me, and it's being not letting the winds of my emotions move me around. And I would imagine, Ryan, you're probably really solid at that. Probably, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like you would probably be more like this, where
Mhm.
I'm like this. And
Mm.
it's helped me at times. It's helped me do really, really amazing things, but it also creates impulsive action. And in trading, you can't be impulsive. You have to be very disciplined.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say I'm a little more, flatline than that. And almost to where that helps me in crisis situations because I can stay pretty even keeled. But then, in terms of taking advantage of certain things when timing's right, sometimes I can miss the boat on things and don't get hyped up enough when I need to. So that's yeah, that's a good point.
I think it's important to understand what you need too, right? We're trying to develop this community and grow it, and we definitely don't want it to just be, localized. I think it's important that that vulnerability side is talked about in the space of, well, sure, this is what I'm struggling with, but this is really how I need the help.
Yeah.
The slap upside the head, as Ryan and I have talked about as trainers in a previous episode, right? There's different ways to encourage someone to keep them accountable. Not everyone receives it the same way. So I think it's important to do a little bit of work on yourself. Maybe that could be something we work on over the next couple of weeks, is finding out, how do I receive accountability? Or, do I put my wall up and say, to hell with you? Or do I take it away and process it? Do I overthink it? Do I underthink it? Do I react? Do I respond? I think it's important to understand how we receive it, because, we're all husbands, we're all fathers, and we're all trainers, and we've got a lot to offer through this podcast. But moving forward, that doesn't mean that each of us in this conversation are going to receive the same, you know, accountability yardstick as the other. So I think it's important that we spend a little bit of time working on that over the next couple of weeks, because I think we're all struggling with certain things, just like everybody out there is. But if you don't understand who it is that you are, then you're going to just constantly put up a wall. And if that's all you ever do, because that's how you're being coached, or you were coached or mentored as a child by a absent parent, or a only, single parent, or a working parent that was never home, right? There's a lot of variables there. And if you don't understand how you need it, it doesn't matter what you're going through. You're not going to get through it. You guys know what I'm saying with that?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that's extremely important. I also think it's important to kind of figure out your own story, and it's going to take some of your own work, right? Your own story, your own identity, because we each have an identity that we tend to gravitate towards no matter what. And there's a story playing in the background of who we are, and sometimes we don't even know, right? So that's another thing that I think is important. Otherwise, it's harder to take people's advice, because your story just shuts off that advice, because your story says, well, I could never do that, or they don't know what I'm talking about, or they don't understand. So that's another thing. So yeah, there's multiple layers to this accountability thing.
So you've shared a little bit about what you're going through, Joe, and obviously you've got this financial burden as a dad and as a husband to provide. So you need some accountability on that side of things. Am I catching that right?
Yeah, definitely. And
Okay.
part of that accountability I would add, and then I'll pass the wand or whatever, is finances don't just mean making sure that I'm doing my job. It's also, what am I spending on, right? Like, what am I doing? Am I responsible with the finances that I do have? That's what got me in trouble. That's what got me in this place to begin with, is that I spent way more than you know, I grew up very poor. So when I started making money, I thought it's never going to end. And so I started living way above my means, and that, you know, adds up fast. So for this next phase of my life and this chapter, I'm very confident that financially we're going to be in a very, very good place. But what do I do with that responsibility? And how do I steward that, you know? And that's the real accountability as well. That's probably the more important accountability.
So what's the next big expense or purchase that you're battling with? Like, let's get something out there that you're putting on the air so that, episode one of the three of us going forward, we've got something we can tie you back to. What is it you're battling or going through today that you need some help to make sure you stay on track with?
So yeah, I'm battling so much I don't even want to say it. So, but I will. My vehicle, my truck. My truck is too expensive. I love it, but it's got to go. I've got to get something that's going to fit within our budget and our lifestyle for now. You know, it's not forever. It's just for now. I need to downgrade, and I need to make that decision probably within the latest 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I've already done some shopping in the past. If I wasn't on this podcast, I probably would have done some shopping and then like, oh, I think I'll just keep it. uh,
How long has that been an issue?
Probably a year.
So what's been the holdup?
Image. I love my vehicle, but I think I love the way I feel in it. I think I love the way I look in it. Because before I had the truck, I had a Sonata that was fully paid off, and I actually liked the way I actually drove it fine. But that's before I came into all this money, and I was happy with that vehicle at the time. So, you know, it's just, again, it was the identity. It's the story that I told myself once I started making money, that I have to be in this, or this is my identity. So that stripping that away, I think will definitely help. But it's been a
Have you got to this point before where you're saying, hey, within 2 weeks, have you been at this 2 week mark before?
no, I haven't been at the 2 week because there was always a rationale, and I was going to have more, you know, finances were going to get better. But I realize now that it's not necessarily about the finances. It's about, like I said, being a good steward of the money we do have, and making the right decisions for my family. And I think it's irresponsible when I look at it. When I really look at it, it's probably irresponsible that I'm still even driving it. So I have to, you know, I basically need to make that decision in 2 weeks. And meaning it's going to happen. It's just what am I gonna get into? You know?
And is it your perception of what people think of you in the new vehicle, or is it the fact that you're changing from that vehicle to something else?
I think it's all perception. I think that's probably been my biggest Achilles heel through my adult life, was, and that I believe has taken up an unneeded amount of energy on what other people think and how I look and what they think of me. That has been a big energy drain in my life. And so that's another reason why I'm on this podcast, to get rid of that. You know, it's like just dropping the bag of bricks that I'm carrying and just being like, okay, you know, and that's probably the biggest thing. That's like the deeper layer, because I know whatever I end up driving, I'll just be okay with it personally.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I know that you mentioned earlier when you heard about Ryan's situation or his new knowledge that he found, you used the word exciting. Does what you're about to do give you a level of excitement?
I think it'll be exciting when I'm not paying that much a month, but no, I think yes, the excitement will come when I finally realize that no one really gives a crap. It's always been me. And even if they do, that doesn't matter either. Like, none of it matters. What matters is, am I becoming a better husband, father, human? Am I being more responsible with what I have? Am I thinking of others? Am I not thinking of just myself? And I think that's what's exciting.
Then you're in the right place. This is awesome. Appreciate you sharing that, Joe. And I want to flip it over to Ryan now because I know that he's got some areas that he'd like some accountability on, and it's been something that's been tough. I think I probably called you out on having some goals and some specific things you wanted help with a couple of months ago, and you would get back on the air and say, to be honest with you, I haven't done it. I don't know where to go with it. So I'd like to know now, Ryan, do you have something that you've come up with or some areas that you really need some help with? Because we're going to start putting it out there. This is that Trilogy episode 1 hashtags type thing, and we're all going to put some skin in the game again as we, hit episode 30.
Yeah, I mean, mine is, when Joe brought up the word accountability to us, it really just kind of clicked in my head of what I need and where I've kind of been struggling. And it's something that goes all the way back to our third episode, Matt, that you and I talked about with the alcohol thing. And, just getting into the whiskey world, the bourbon world. And, just to catch Joe up, I started a bourbon club back in Virginia, and, it's 1,700 members, and we do barrel picks and, single barrel selections. And, we get together and, here in Jacksonville, we, get together on the weekends and have bottle shares and things like that. So it's bourbon and alcohol has become a big part of my life over the last 5 years. And, the thing that, I've struggled with at first was overconsumption, and a little bit like what Joe talked about a couple weeks ago, just getting drunk too often, over consuming and doing that sort of thing. I've gotten a handle on that over the last, I say year or so, year and a half. I've gotten a handle on the overconsumption daily and that sort of thing. But to be honest with you guys, and honest with the audience, I still am consuming alcohol almost daily. And that's not to say I'm getting drunk or getting wasted every day and every night in a sloppy fashion, but still consuming alcohol. And so basically, a couple of months ago, I put it out to myself. I was like, hey, I've got to at least take a day a week where I'm not having alcohol. And I stuck to that pretty well. I took Mondays and, said, hey, I'm not going to have any drinks on Monday and keep that as a dry day. And so really what I need accountability on is I just need to expand and have more dry days in my week. And so I'd like to get that number up to where I'm not drinking, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I'm just not there yet. And so kind of what I want accountability on in the beginning right now as we're talking is just simply expanding that dry day into a Tuesday, which it sounds pretty simple. It almost sounds silly for me to say it, but hey, you've got a dry day on Monday where you're not having any drinks. Let's expand it into a Tuesday and have a Monday, Tuesday streak where you're not consuming any alcohol whatsoever. And that's pretty much what I need help with right now.
So, Ryan, can I ask you a question as far as how did you accomplish the dry Monday? Are you doing anything different? Like, why did you choose Monday?
Yeah, it was kind of just a decision I made. Like, hey, you got to have one day. Why not make it the day after the weekend? Make it a Monday, and I might have an extra, flavored water or Zevia soda or something like that to kind of ease the tension. It's as it's kind of a dopamine hit thing. Having that drink and getting that dopamine hit So every day when 5 o'clock rolls around, 5:30 rolls around, if that urge is there to like, hey, let's pour a cocktail, let's pour a drink. And so kind of taking that off the plate on Mondays and being like, all right, that's my day. I'm not gonna do that. It's tough to get through, but I've been able to manage it fairly well over the last couple months. And like I said, I just need to expand that, slowly into more days. And so Tuesday, being the next day, having a good 2 day stretch of like, all right, let's not have alcohol be a part of our lives for these 2 days of the week. It sounds kind of silly, but it's something I gotta get full of.
No, it's not silly at all. In fact, when I stopped, I had to come up with a plan. For me, I substituted. So, like, for example, if 5:36 rolls around and that's when you want that the dopamine, I would have planned an F45 session right then, or I would have planned something else in that area when I wanted it. So for example, I was a bartender after work, I would go right out and drink. Well,
Mm-hmm.
instead, it was 20 years ago, I would go home and play video games in my room, and that was my substitute. I don't know why it worked because I don't even like video games, but it worked. And it got me through that first 3 months. And again, I'm just thinking that a substitute would be pretty solid, maybe something to think about, and then we can hold you accountable, maybe text you during that time and just say, "Hey, did you find something?" Or you can just tell us, "Yeah, I found a substitute," or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Something like going for a run, getting back into running. I enjoy running. So going for a jog, going for a run during that time period is probably going to be beneficial. Yeah, I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. Get out of the house, do so you gotta get away from, because I even think substituting a drink might not even be a good pri that could be in the future, but right now, I think because it has a pretty strong hold, you need movement. You need a bigger dopamine hit, something
Mm,
that replaces it that you're like, yeah, that's okay. That's a good trade off.
yeah, yeah. So that's kind of my goal for right now is let's expand that dry day into Tuesday and, get a good 48-hour streak in. And, like I said, I'm not getting wasted throughout the week because I literally can't do that with a 5-month-old at home and the responsibilities I have. But, having a couple days now where alcohol is not a part of the mix is, is something I know I need to work on and expand on. So appreciate your guys accountability help on that.
So can I ask a question? Because I think it's important for me to understand a little bit there why you've been doing that for the last couple of months and wanted to get a Tuesday in but haven't brought it up. Did it help having a fellow alcoholic or past alcoholic to bring that up to versus someone that's never drunk in their life?
Maybe, yeah. It's a little more. I know Joe's going to have a little more relatability to it because you've never really consumed alcohol or had that pull to. But something just clicked when Joe said that word accountability. And I love that direction that we're kind of leaning toward of like this being the podcast centered around accountability now, whereas Matt, you and I started this and, like you said, the first episode, broken but hopeful. And we've had some great episodes, had some great guests on, but that word accountability, we never really threw it around too much until Joe brought it up and it just kind of clicked in my head. It's like, oh, okay. That's what I need to work on next is that. And for some reason the word goal didn't trigger that. Because I never would have thought that as a goal. Because when you say goal, I'm like, well, I should do this or I should, achieve that or achieve this. But in terms of accountability, I'm like, that's what I really need to 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 stop doing this thing that I really know I shouldn't be doing this often. And just kind of clicked, I guess.
Knowing that you're talking to someone, at least on the air and the audience that's listening as well, that's been in those very shoes and maybe even to a place that's deeper and darker than that, right? Not to compare them, but you've both
Mm,
shared some pretty dark stories about how probably could have been a life ending addiction, right? Which we don't like to use that, but choice, right? A repetitive
mm-hmm.
choice there. knowing you've got someone that really gets it, even though you and I have known each other a lot longer, will the counsel from Joe or the accountability from Joe have a little more sting to it because he has been dry for 20 years versus coming from me that's never drunk in his life?
Yeah, I think it'll have a little bit more relatability. Yeah, just naturally.
And the reason I really want to zero in on that is because I think it's really important as we grow this community that that's exactly why we want to grow this and have a bigger audience, because it's very hard to hear someone say, "Oh yeah, I've been struggling with this over here." The reliability seems to drop off, and therefore you don't reach out to that one person, right? I think, Joe, you've talked a little bit about AAs having a model there where you're not sitting around a bunch of people that are struggling with gambling trying to give you advice on not how to pick up that next drink, right? You're surrounded by people that are or have struggled picking up that next drink.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you're surrounded by people that have done worse than you. Maybe they're not as bad as you, but everything they say, not everything, but it's very relatable. You're like, yeah, I remember that. I know that feeling. I know how that feels. And then for me, when I was in the meetings, I would see, and this was before I was a kid, in my 20s, but I'd see doctors and lawyers and millionaires in these meetings, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, this they're I that was hard for me to believe because I just figured everyone that had this problem was a loser. And I realized, no, 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 that's not the case. This is total, and it changed my entire look on it. And that opened my eyes to realize, oh, okay. Anyways, so I think, like you said, more people that we can get on this podcast, or a group of people that have different challenges, the more we can help people, because it does make a big difference. Because when he's talking about that bourbon, I know exactly what he's talking about, like exactly, and I know the challenges he has because I've already had them, I've gone through them, and I've come out the other end. So yeah.
This is exciting.
Yeah.
The last couple of weeks of making this decision to have Joe join us on this movement, I just had that moment right there where I've just got chills all over my body as I watched it unfold live on air. The very reason that community and accountability matters, and having you on the show, Joe, has just hit me like a ton of bricks. That's why. That's why you can't do it alone, right? That's why there's a 2 in strength to overcome, because the minute you try and do it on your own, you're at the mercy of your own mind. And we've all been in places where we've isolated ourselves and pulled away from people around us because, well, I can convince myself that what I'm doing is okay and I can keep doing it, versus the minute there's someone else, that level of accountability does go up. But the minute now there's someone else that's been in those shoes, they're not in every scenario of your life right now, Ryan, but he can relate to that taste, that smell. So your ability to reach that same level of understanding immediately right there just gave me chills to the point where I realized this is a really necessary step to have you with us on this journey, Joe. So powerful moment for me there. Just took a second to share that, because even though I wasn't part of it, I watched it unfold and felt good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good stuff. So what about you, Matt? We've talked a little bit about Joe and talked about my stuff. And when we're talking that accountability piece, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I think we hit it last week where we recorded, I think, probably one of the rawest episodes since the beginning, where we really put out some stuff there. I talked about sleeping in another bed and really struggling in my marriage, and, the M word, right? The masturbation word that nobody wants to talk about, right? Everybody doing it, but nobody wants to talk about it. And I remember hearing this story one time that kind of blew my brain where, they had this convention, a religious convention, and I don't know how the data was collected, but I remember hearing this where at the end of the convention of people that leaders in their religious section or positions were away from home, and at the end of that weekend they did a stat where they ran the numbers on how many of those rooms that were housing those people had engaged with their television of some sort of pornography or a channel of, adult nature. And it was at some astronomical level, like 90% of the rooms at the evening had clicked into some sort of an adult channel. And it just blew my brain when I heard this stat many, many years ago. And I think I always allowed it to justify my actions. Oh, well, if the leaders of the flock are still struggling with it, then it's okay for me to do it too, right? It didn't actually help me to hear that. It actually worked against me. And I found myself for years leaning on that, thinking, well, listen, everybody's doing it. It's an okay thing to do. And, whether it was men or women in this position, they were engaging in it away from home at a, some type of religious conference. And it just blew my brain in the wrong direction. And so I think I've always allowed myself to lean on that. And I think throughout my life, I think there's a lot of times where you hear jokes about people say, well, there's two types of people in this world, right? Those that admit to, struggling with lust, and then there's liars, right? There's this concept that we can't talk about this. And, for those in the religious circles, we know that, two of the strongest people, scripturally speaking, were undone by lust, right? We've got, King David, we've got Solomon, his life was ruined by lust. We've got Samson, the strongest man, scripturally speaking, that ever lived, and he was undone by lust. And so to not talk about it really is silly at this point. It's like, what are we doing? We read about it, we hear sermons about it. Everybody knows about it, but no one's actually going to go up and say, yeah, I've struggled with that level of lust. Now, I will say I've been married twice in my life, and I've only been intimate with those two women. I'm not running around, doing what, most teenagers do when they hit that age of being able to get away with it, so to speak, right? So I think I've been faithful in that area, and I've allowed myself to think that I was being faithful. In all reality, there were times in my life where it would consume me. And so I would justify it. And so as I look at the times in my life where I've had a grip on this, bad example there, but we'll laugh about it now, right? There have been times in my life where I have really felt in control of it. Like you guys can probably lean on with your alcohol things of the past. But, when I got married again, there was no need for it, right? There's this unbelievable connection with somebody new, and you've got a life that you're living, and you're trying to have kids, right? So there was really nothing there to pull me back into that mindset. And then kids come along, fatigue comes along, sleep deprivation kicks in, work, the pressure of being a husband, a provider, now a father, and before you know it, you've allowed yourself to justify your actions of slipping back into that, masturbation habit. And so over the course of this last 8 months, I've stayed dry, as we're going to use that term for you guys, but there's still that struggle. There's still that mindset of falling back into that to take care of what I've termed my needs, right? I'm a good husband. I'm working hard. I'm a good dad. These needs aren't being met. So therefore, I'm going to take care of it myself and be okay with it. When in all reality, that's not okay for me. Now, there's a lot of people out there that say it's healthy and it's natural and it's normal, and that's fine. I'm not judging anyone that's doing it. But I know that if I want to be in a position where I can help a lot of people overcome something that puts a wall up between you and your spouse, I need to master it. And so last week I talked to Ryan after the episode and said, I can't even listen to that episode. I can't even hear myself talk about it. So it's taken me some time to be able to even process it. Now here I am again. And the more times I talk about it and be open about it, I can simply say, yeah, I'm in a great streak right now. But that temptation there is something I want to make sure that I don't surround myself with people that say, it's okay, it's normal. You're in a marriage where there's no intimacy, so why wouldn't you, right? I don't want to be around people that are going to do that, and that's not what this podcast is centered around doing. It's about bringing people together that say the very best version of yourself, Matt, has that under control. In fact, it's not even a thing, right? And so I really want the accountability side on making sure that, sure, I've got to be on Facebook because of this podcast and sharing things. I've got to be on the Instagram side of things. But do I have to click on something that's got absolutely no value in my life? No, I don't. Do I have to allow myself to run with some thoughts outside of my marriage? Absolutely no, I don't. Do I want my marriage to last? Do I want to be sleeping in the same bed as my wife that I adore and think is one of the most attractive women I've ever seen? Of course, that's the goal, right? And so I'm making a lot of decisions without any accountability. And so I'm throwing it out to you guys now to make sure that, sure, I might be struggling in my marriage and it might be something that's embarrassing to talk about, but at the same time, I want to be the best version of myself for my wife, regardless of how we're getting along. I want to love her unconditionally, regardless of whether I feel like my needs are being met. And I want to be a great dad so that they find a man, because I've got 2 girls, for those that have never listened before, that are going to go out and they're going to look for a man. And I need to make sure they're looking for a man that's got things like this under control, because sure, it might sound harmless, or what's the big deal if you're not having your needs met, but what that does is it works its way into your actions to the point where, well, that's no longer enough. So, taking care of it now might feel like that's okay, but fast forward a year from now, you've got to find that next level of fix, that next level of dopamine hit. And I'm not looking to have a third wife. I'm not looking to be intimate with a third person. I would like to be done and rekindle that as I grow, and hopefully this marriage can be healed again. So I know that was a lot, and I might have a few people walk around some equipment to move past me moving forward, even some clients maybe. But ultimately, that's where I need the accountability on that.
I have a few questions for you, Matt, real quick, because yeah, that's a lot. That's intense. And first off, congrats on the 8 months. That's something to be proud of for sure. I would say, when you're looking at, in a perfect world, what does your target look like? Because this is a tricky one, because I don't know that you'll ever reach your target with this one, because the brain is going to continue to do this over the course of your life, because it is embedded in us as men. Now, lust, maybe not, but that urge to, well, I don't even know how to label it right now, but I'll just say, what is your target? First question. And then second question would be, how are you wanting to be held accountable? Because that's a tricky one too, right? So I guess the first thing is, what is your target? Because right now, for all intensive purposes, you are hitting your no masturbation target, and you're doing great. I mean, 8 months that's pretty amazing. Now, the fact that you have these, wavering thoughts, I don't know that I would beat myself up too much about it. I would just bring my brain back to the good. It's kind of like a meditation. And I think it's that monkey mind that's always going. And so I think it's important that you create a goal, because you could be running to something you never get. And that could be frustrating as well. So
Yeah, that's great. And again, why we have this episode specifically, and a community that grows, because I think there's a lot of people out there that are going to hear what I've been going through over the last few years and say, well, I don't blame you, or, what are you even doing there, right? For me, my target is that I'm in control of those thoughts, right? So that I don't allow them to change my mood. When
okay.
I find myself in an aggravated state, or a less than patient husband and father because of that thought creeping in, that's when I know that I'm unbalanced in allowing that thought too far in. I've allowed it to now affect my mood. And so I know that's really hard to sort of say, well, how would you guys keep me accountable on that? I think for me, it's my attitude that I would have to almost just be open with and share with you guys. Hey, listen, I've been frustrated with my wife lately because I've worked my ass off. I don't see any movement, and maybe there never will be mindset, which I'm not saying I've thought that. I'm saying I have to be at the place where, you said it beautifully before, find something else to put in that space. So if Ryan at 5:36 tomorrow night feels like he needs to have a drink but doesn't have anything to replace it with, then that's going to be a real challenge. And I think then that's when the resentment creeps in and takes over his mood, his attitude. It turns into a fight. And we're just looking for something. And sometimes that fight can be that dopamine hit, because I just got to get something, right? Find someone to blame. So for me, my goal is to get to the place where my mood is the same constantly, regardless of whether I feel like I've been unfairly dealt a series of cards, or maybe I just have that urge, like you say. And it's okay for men to have that urge and say, I really would like to be intimate for no other reason than I've got an urge, versus, hey, there was a lot of connection, I want to have that that event take place. And so I think that it's okay for me to have that urge, but it's not okay for me to have that urge unmet and then become a different person.
And so something I heard in the meetings that always resonated with me when I was quitting drinking is you're not responsible for your first thought, but you are responsible for your second one. And like that to me hit me so hard, so simple, but so that first lust or whatever thought, you're not always, I don't think you should be responsible for it, but what you do afterwards, you are responsible for. Because our brain does fire a lot of things that we don't control. Like it just fires thoughts, it fires things. And I don't think it's realistic to think that you're going to get to a point where every thought is under your control, because that's pretty much impossible. But I do think your actions are what matter. So that clears it up for me as far as what you're looking for. It's what you do with the thoughts. It basically is what you're saying, kind of how they shape your next move, and that's what you want to be accountable for. Okay, sweet.
Yep. And, just making sure as I have to engage in social media, which I was never on for 20 years, to make sure that I don't slow down and click on anything that is untoward. I think we all have feeds that come through, and every now and then you see something that you can either stop on, or you can listen to or watch, or you can say that's not for me. And you can actually, hit the buttons that say not interested, or you could flick through. And I think that over time, we all know that our phones continuously send us things that we've either slowed down on or looked at. And so you either got a constant feed of, in my case, a lot of cricket highlights or Australian rules footy highlights or some self-help gurus, Dispenza or Jordan Peterson, right? I get a lot of those things coming through in my feed. And so I can quickly find out, hey, am I on the right track here? What keeps coming up on my feed? And so I think something that you guys could seriously keep me accountable on is what level of distraction are you allowing to creep in, and what does your feed look like, to the point where I can't do this with you, Ryan, but Joe, I could literally, run into you in the gym one day and you could say, give me your phone, go to whatever social media thing, hit reels, and you could flick through and literally see what comes up on my feed, because that will tell you what I've been watching or slowing down on or pausing on most recently. So that would be a hard,
Okay.
yes, no, because you could literally say, I know that's a lot to share with you, but that would expose me pretty quick if I had been in the wrong areas. And I think that would be a pretty neat way to do it, to make sure I don't even give that stuff time to become a thought, because there's a lot of really good content out there that I've watched and listened to that's helped me change my life. But there's also a lot of garbage. And so I think that would help me stay on track specifically.
Love it. Awesome. Before we wrap up, I just want to pray to the people in Australia who lost their lives. I don't know if you watched the news, but there was a pretty bad massacre in Australia. So just praying for them. And I know you have family over there, so I don't know if it's close to where you have family. I think it was in Sydney.
Absolutely. Not aware of it, but that's because I don't keep my nose up to date with the news. So appreciate you sharing that. And as soon as I get off here, I'll check in and see what's going on there. So I appreciate that.
Stuff, guys. Man, I'm excited for the future. It's going to be a cool run here. I like where we're headed, and we've got a great guest lined up for next week with the three of us, and then onward from there. And I love that A word, accountability. That's I think that's going to be a great theme for us as we move forward and have more guests on the show and help more people as we grow this thing.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Give us the links that we need, Ryan, because you're the expert in that area, and then we can get everyone back to, probably headed to work, right? We get listened to on the way to work, right?
Yeah, guys, if you're interested in being on the show, and not just, we're not just looking for the gurus or people who have accomplished it all. We're looking for the people who are struggling too, and want to make a difference and change something about themselves and be held accountable to that change. Shoot us an email, either a instant message on Instagram or an email, info.strengthtoovercome@gmail.com. Shoot us a message, and let's talk about getting you on the show and helping you hold yourself accountable to these things that you need to in your life, and we'll kind of grow it from there.
I love it, Joe. Thanks for being on, man. You're not an average Joe. You're Joe, and great to have you on, mate. I think this is about to go the direction we've always hoped and prayed it would. So thanks for being a part of that, and you've given us a lot today as well. So appreciate you being on, and give everyone out there a reminder to give Joe some love here as he walks through the gym next time and sees people that may have heard this stuff now but never knew it. Listen, this is not easy. So you remember to, be graceful in our opportunities that we have with Joe and Ryan and even myself, right? So we appreciate the support as well.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate having me
Cheers,
on.
guys.
All right, guys. We'll catch you next week.
Stay strong.